You're listening to Love and Light with Dr. Lisa, Everyday Living in Peace. Day-to-day living can be difficult in our world today, and most people don't know how to live a peaceful, joy-filled existence. The key to this is simple: love. Join me, Dr. Lisa Collins, for the next hour as I unpack and identify the need for a peaceful, love-filled existence by engaging the challenging and hard topics of life. On this show, you will lean into the healing practices that enlarge your spiritual reality through the act of love. This kind of love begins with yourself and your neighbor and transcends age, race, sex, generation, class, and sexual identity. The world changes when we root ourselves in love. Love and Light with Dr. Lisa starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa, and you're listening to Love and Light, Living Every Day in Peace on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience how to bring more love into your everyday life. We're here each second and fourth Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 12 Mountain, 4 Eastern, and we will have tools for living every day in peace. How many of us know anything about food systems? What are food systems? And what guides the food that we eat? Answering that question is something we all should consider. When it comes to Indigenous communities, how do we answer that question? Indigenous people have had their lives, food systems, and cultures destroyed and continually interrupted. We're going to learn more about this topic with our guest, Lyla June. I'm super excited about this. An Indigenous musician, scholar, community organizer, and historical ecologist. And I don't want to hack the correct pronunciation of your Indigenous lineage, so I'm going to ask you to do that. But I am super excited about her dynamic, multi-gender, multi-genre presentation style, and about all that she brings to healing in our world. So welcome to Love and Life.
Thank you. Yes, and it's Diné, if you could say it with me, Diné.
Diné?
Yeah, that's my mother's lineage, and then Tsétsêhéstâhese.
Testis?
Yes, I really like people to try, even if they don't get it right, because I think we need to learn the names of the people whose lands we're standing on. Tsétsêhéstâhese is my father's mother's lineage, which is also known as the Cheyenne.
Yes, I see it in a parentheses, but what I heard from your TEDx talk was you said that is not it. And so I was
Yeah, all of the native nations throughout what we now call the United States were renamed incorrectly. Like, for instance, the Papago Indians is a really weird way to say the um, Tohono O'odham people, or Akimel O'odham people. So part of the process of colonization is to rename everything because when you rename everything, you erase what was there before and you supplant it with your own distorted version of the true history and identity of the indigenous people and indigenous environments. So yeah, Diné is our true name on my mother's side, which means the people, but a lot of people know us as Navajo, but Navajo is not even our name. It's just like a random word that they came up with. So yeah, anyways, those are my lineages. And then my father's father is also European. So I have some of that going on too.
awesome. I really appreciate you calling out the settler colonialism and the erasure of culture. As a Black American woman, I have that experience. But what I have noticed is the lack of even discussing the erasure of Native American, like the land that we stand on. And I know that you've seen this. We're going to acknowledge, but really, like the soul has not really acknowledged the harm, and that's why your work really stands out to me as it intersects with the work that I do as well. It's like, how do we bring healing? And I love what you said at the end of your TED talk. Like, this is I'm paraphrasing because this is what I say quite often. This is all of our works. How do we can't move forward until we heal what is. And so I
Mhm.
appreciate all that you're bringing to these many topics.
Yeah, they often say that the healing of one is the healing of all, and the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And that's because we are so intertwined inherently. That's how the creator made this universe, from my perspective. And so, whatever happens for any one of our nations indirectly affects the liberation of the rest. And so, the healing of native nations will equate the healing of all nations on this land. It's very exciting because I see the needle moving in that direction.
I pray so. I pray so, but I see evidence of it. I see evidence of the rise of the vibration in the earth. I see evidence of the earth, uh, the cultivation of nature and people together. I see that oneness. I feel it and I see it occurring, even though when I look at the any media or anything else, I see this real negative vibration or this low vibration coming. But like a person like you who has done like this amazing work and just the way that you talk about it. So let's talk a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey? Like, how did you get to this place? I mean, a scholar, a musician, a community organizer, a historical ecologist. Like, how did you get to this place?
Well, I could never figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, No, but
I can relate to that.
I find that in a lot of Native women is they're very multifaceted. Like look at like Winona LaDuke, for example. She's an author, but she's also a mother, but she's also a tribal, politician, but she also grows hemp, but she's also defending the wild rice, but she's also stopping pipelines, and she's also really into equestrianism, and she's an incredibly talented horsewoman. So it's like I think that's the nature of indigenous peoples. I might dare to say, we never understood why you had to be one thing. When you're a kid, they say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" As if you can only be one thing. And
Right.
I don't think that's part of our worldview. I think you are whatever you need to be at the time. And what you are depends on what's being asked for in your environment. And sometimes I was being asked to be a poet, and sometimes I was being asked to be a PhD. Sometimes I was being asked to uh, organize a school in my community, and I like all of them, But there's also things I'm not good at, like I can't paint. I'm not very good at arts and crafts and stuff. But I think the way I got to where I am today is that it's all creator. I definitely struggled with drugs and alcohol when I was 11 years old. I started doing drugs and alcohol. I was a complete alcoholic by the time I got to Stanford University. I was drinking every day as a freshman at Stanford. And then in these universities, there's a lot of drugs, all different kinds that I was unfortunately addicted to. Suffered a lot of the, what do they call it? Adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. Had plenty of,
Yes.
when I took that little survey, I had plenty of those checked off,
Yeah, I
a
feel
lot
that
of the,
too.
yeah. And so, yeah, I was a very traumatized, and in some regards, I still am, individual. But I think my trauma gave me a pathway of learning how to heal, which I wouldn't have
Mhm.
had otherwise. And so now I get to share that mode as much as I can. That's some of the beautiful thing about healing is that you get to share what you learn with others. So each little step I take towards becoming more and more whole, or rather realizing that I'm already whole, um, I get to share those steps with the world. So I think as I journey, I take the world with me. And I think that's kind of how I ended up where I am today, because people think I have some answers. And I think the only reason I have any answers at all is because my elders have helped me to
Yes.
heal step by step and piece by piece. So um, but yeah, in terms of the PhD, I just really wanted to um, put the record, correct the record that Native people, you were talking about food systems, we were not these simpletons. We were not cavemen. We were not tribal nomads. We had highly, tightly organized societies. We were densely populating the land. And our food systems were not like, oh, I'm going to go hunt a deer with my bow and arrow. Hopefully, I'll find a deer today. No, we were systematically burning grasslands every fall. Our lunar calendars talk about that. You know, we have the grass burning moon every September, in which we burn the grasses, which brings ash into the soil, and in the wake of that burning comes nutrient dense grasses, which attract the deer. So the deer were actually coming into habitat that we had a big part in the upkeeping of. And so we weren't just hunting randomly deer, we were actually expanding deer habitat so the deer would come to us. And we had managed entire bioregions like this in many different ways that I could get into. But that's just one example. So that's really what the PhD part of me came into being, was the elders were telling me, look, our history is poorly understood in this country. They think we were all uncivilized savages. Lyla, can you get out there and tell them the truth? So I had to, you know, research that and excavate those articles. And when you scratch the surface, you do find a lot of what our people used to do here before Columbus was born, and it's extraordinary. And so it's been my joy and my honor to share that with the world, and sort of correct the record about, you know, how extraordinary our civilizations were here.
Absolutely. Um, absolutely. I found, first of all, I want to say that we have a lot in common. I also am a healer and came from a lot of trauma, and some of it
Hmm.
self-induced, like what you described. And it
Hmm.
was through the healing that illuminated this podcast. It illuminated and I am also like, we're on a similar journey. I'm sharing that with people um, who would like to come on this journey, and a lot
Hmm.
of it is around community well-being. And so I just
Mm.
want to acknowledge that, and I that is a unintended consequence of talking to you today. But I just I see like souls, so I just want to say that. Um,
Oh,
and
thank
when
you.
yes, the narratives that we have in the United States around Indigenous people, the um the continued um uh narratives that we continue to use in our media, in our movies, in our music, in our pictures, are false. And I love that you are illuminating this, um, and shining the light on, well, of course, these complex systems were in place. And I have to say, I have not heard it anyplace else. I went through a whole bunch of school just like you. Um,
Hmm.
I haven't heard it, so I'm happy that you're talking about it, and I want to get this podcast out so where people can hear it. That
Hmm.
these um first of all, to me, that we don't acknowledge settler colonialism. Period.
Hmm.
Like this is not the way it, and my people being kidnapped and brought here, we don't acknowledge any of that. So, if people are listening to this podcast, I want you to understand that when people are conquered or overtaken, that their culture is stripped away from them, and then what is put in place is what the colonizer, their culture and what they want you to learn. And what we're talking about now is how indigenous um communities are represented, continue to be represented, and misrepresented, and basically all areas of that I have been exposed to.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, the last chapter of my dissertation actually looks at the process of colonization worldwide. It looks at, for example, the way that the British colonized the Irish. It looks at the way that the Thai kingdom is colonizing the neighboring hill tribes. It looks at the way that European powers denigrated and dehumanized people in Africa, the way that Australians and Tasmanians were dehumanized. And what you see time and time and time again is, or even the Romans against the so called pagans, What you see time and time again is that there's one people who wants the land or labor of another people, right? So that's step one. Step two, deep down in their hearts, they know that it's wrong. And being the moral beings that we are, ironically, we have to create some moral justification for why we're going to take this person's land or take their labor, aka slavery. And so then you devise a moral justification, um, which in this case is they're not human. They're not humans, so they don't matter. So the same moral laws don't apply to them. Like what they would say about Africans was awful, right? They would say that they're lazy. They would say that they're animals, and what they would say about my people is that we're savages. We are not even human. Um, and then there's different forms of asserting cultural superiority. So one is to say, oh, they don't have the same religion as us, so therefore they're not human. You know, they truly said that. The Christian,
Mm-hmm.
the Roman Catholic Church said that about Native people, is like they don't believe in Christ, therefore they don't have a soul, therefore they are not human,
That's right. They don't
therefore
have a
do
soul.
whatever
They're
you
not
want.
human. That's right.
So there's a religious justification. There's also the technological justification of like, oh, they don't have wristwatches, so they're not human, or they don't have iPads, so they're less human, or they don't have, the proper implements of civilized life. Um, Another justification is the social Darwinism thing of like
Yes.
they're not even evolved into the type of Homo sapiens that we are. And so that's where eugenics comes in. That's where not just eugenics, but also white supremacy in general. This notion that that other people aren't as evolved. That's what Hitler did to Jewish people. You know, they just weren't. So this thing called moral exclusion, where because the people aren't human, they are excluded from moral treatment. Like they don't need to be morally treated. And frankly, we do this to people, but we also do this to genders, right? Like, oh, well, she's a woman, so she's just not important as this man because she's a woman. Or, and then you get to the other one, which is even more interesting, which is, you know, there's white supremacy, male supremacy, aka patriarchy, but then there's human supremacy. This notion that, oh, they're not human, so we can put 5,000 pigs in a pen, inject them with chemicals, force them to breed, take their babies away from them when they're born, because they don't really have a soul. They're just animals, you know? So my point is that yes, the American government did denigrate us, but that is actually a necessary part of colonization because when you are hurting someone this bad, you have to create a narrative that that sanitizes your actions. Because if they're not really human, then you didn't really steal anyone's land. And if they're not really human, you didn't really kill anyone. You just killed some animals, which in the 1700s, I swear to God, we were animals to them. We were nothing more. Even though I love
Absolutely.
animals, don't get me wrong. So
Yeah.
anyway, my point is that the narrative distortion is part and parcel of subjugation. It has to be there because if you admit that they're human, you have to admit you are committing an atrocity. And that is too much for the human brain to handle. So you have to create this narrative that you're not doing anything wrong because they don't actually matter. So main point being, yeah, not only did they distort our narrative, rather distort the narrative of who we are, what we were, etc. They had to in order to commit colonization.
And so I love that because so in my work and in the work of interrupting, of healing and transforming, there is this huge chasm that we have to get through, that we have to get to the other side of, and it's exactly what you've described. If made sense, we've had this narrative in our head, well, we justification for doing so, Now, when we're saying, okay, it's time to play the piper, so to speak, we have to look at what has occurred that is morally unjust and feel the pain of the suffering,
True.
so that we can walk forward together. And that is where the work stops. It has stopped there, but I'm pushing it forward because I'm saying we're going to walk together and we're going to continue to walk in this way. But I believe that that is what the world needs, is that we have to accept that this atrocity has occurred, these atrocities. We have to feel, and then we walk forward together.
Yeah, you bring up a good point because a lot of times the reason why society continues to uphold and distort these narratives is because they're postponing that feeling process, right? Like if you treat a whole bunch of pigs like trash for as many decades as we have, and then you finally truly admit, oh wait, these beings are equal to us. They're our brothers and our sisters. They have souls, they have eyes, they have children, they have their own nations. Then it's like, oh crap, we've been so bad. And you have to feel all that, right? So I think you're right. Like the reason white supremacy is such a sticky, stubborn thing that just keeps on, and people even double down on it, right? When like we see the Trump administration like doubling down on this notion of white supremacy and even being nakedly, um, unapologetically adopting it, is because waiting on the other side of that is all this feeling. So I think what I've been trying to do is how do we find creative ways to help people not be so scared of this feeling process, which in turn is a healing process. And what I've found is that two things. Number one, help them see they're the same as you. And number two, help reassure them there's forgiveness on the other side. Because forgiveness is this magical thing, right? Where you literally take pain and you choose to let it go as the quote unquote victim. And you choose to love them and have compassion and understanding for them. So a lot of what we've experienced in Eurocentric culture is a punitive justice model.
Yes.
Where if you do something wrong, you must
pay.
experience a punitive, right? So in by their own rules, if they admit to what they've done, they have to go to jail, pay a fine, blah blah blah.
That's right.
But what if those weren't the rules? What if we lived in a restorative justice world where colonial powers or the Thai kingdom or the British army of the 1600s or whatever it was, or even my people, the way that Diné people harmed their neighboring Pueblo people. I have to own up to that too. We weren't always perfect as Native people. So what if that process was a restorative process where we could forgive, where it could be like, look, we're not asking you to go to jail. We just want you to acknowledge what happened and say you're sorry so we can move the heck on, for God's sake.
Right.
This is number one. Number two is like help people see that they're the same as you. Like for example, we like to demonize white folks, right? We like to demonize Euro-American settler colonial descendants, right? But if you look deeper, these folks come from communities who experience the same thing just 1,000 years earlier. Where in Europe, they were burning women alive. They were drowning women alive. Like I said, the British Army would go into Scotland and murder people. And the first people they would kill were the storytellers, who were called bards.
That's right.
They would bury the bards face down so that their stories would die with them.
That's right.
You could go on and on. The bubonic plague, a third of Europe being wiped out overnight. You have the Roman expansion, the Inquisition, on and on. So, point being, if we help people see, like, hey, you're not bad, you're actually just continuing a cycle of badness that happened to you and your ancestors, which I make space for to grieve. and to cry for. And once they do that, then it's helpful to see like, okay, we are all in this together. We are all
Absolutely.
suffering from the same
Absolutely.
processes of domination.
Right. Well, it's time for a break, if you can believe that already. You're listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, and our guest, Lyla June, an Indigenous musician, scholar, so much more. Just as the list goes on, but we'll be right back. We're going to take a short break. We're back on Love and Light, living every day in peace. My guest, Lyla June, an Indigenous musician, scholar, community organizer, and historical ecologist, and much, much more. But I want to make sure that people know, where can people contact you? Where can they find out about you?
Yeah, well, I have a website, lylajune.com, Lylajune, and that has like essays, videos, um, and music and speeches and all the random stuff I do, my academic papers, my journalism. I write for Indian Country Today from time to time. And then I also have Instagram, which is Lyla June as well. And I have TikTok, which I don't know how to use because I'm too old, but I still have it. It's Lyla June Talk, TOK. And I have a total of
I'm
like 5 videos.
impressed.
I know, right? I'm working on it. YouTube, is probably the most keep you busy the longest. I have way too many videos up there of just different topics and music videos and whatnot. That's just Lyla June. And then I have basically those are the main ones that you can kind of check out. But I also have a podcast myself,
I
which
saw
is called
that.
yeah, it's
Nice.
called Nehijer, Our Voices,
I
an
love it.
Indigenous Solutions podcast. And the goal for me starting it was to shine light onto Indigenous leaders, mostly Indigenous women, who are doing incredible work, but maybe aren't getting as much exposure as we would like them to have. So we talk on a variety of topics, everything from, publishing a book as an Indigenous author to, an Indigenous cookbook that just came out to our most recent one was following Karen Rodriguez and her journey from Los Angeles as an immigrant woman going back home to Guatemala, where her Mayan roots are, and her journey of
Oh, wow.
reconnecting with her indigenous roots and her ancestral homelands, which I think, honestly, anyone, no matter what race you are, could get a lot out of that one. It's just an incredible story. So yeah, there's those some ways you can stay in touch with my work.
That's really nice. I was looking at your website last night and looking at all the things that you've done, and some of the, I mean, there's a lot to see there, and I appreciate that you have your work and your scholarship up for people to read. I was looking at your master's thesis, and
Mhm.
there's just so much there, and so it's such a it is a great resource for people who are also seeking the light and who are also seeking the healing. And I appreciate that you have such a robust website.
Thanks. It's sort of like the the I won't say dumping ground because it's more than that, but like the gateway to just all of the like how do I put all this stuff into one library? So there's a lot, like you said, a lot going on there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Much awesome. We were just before the last segment talking about like the healing process and how do we get people, and were talking about like on the other side of the pain is getting to that point where we can for helping people realize. And what the work that I do is around healing, and it started with racial healing, my own, and
Hmm.
working with people through the lens of wellness and like trauma response, like really paying attention to what's going on in the body, and
Mm,
having each person pay attention to that, and then we slowly move toward the oppressive structures and diversity, equity, inclusion, but
mm,
we center right here with. And so
hmm.
when those feelings come up when we're working in cross racial identities, like what's coming up for you, that's about you. It's not a pie.
Right.
If I have pie, you don't have pie. it is that's not what we're talking about. And so trying to get underneath some of those structural oppressions to like build community and grow. And when we get to that painful part for you as a European American, like we're going to help support you through that. Like it's just like you mentioned, we're going to get to the other side. But that initial feeling in diversity, equity, and inclusion work and in education, we don't ever talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, one time because I don't really know the experience, even though I am almost half European, I don't know the experience of a Euro American very well. Um, but it was fascinating. I was asked to lead like a mindfulness meditation on racism. Um, and so I basically was talking about colonization. I was talking about the genocide of indigenous peoples, and I consciously knew this would be a tough topic, but I knew people were down to explore how the body was reacting. And it was fascinating because I asked everyone to put in the chat, like, how are you feeling? And it's mostly Euro Americans. And they said things like scared, guilty, terrified, you know, um, um, unsure, or, like uncertain, worried I'm not doing the right thing. And I think it was really fascinating. Uh, I shouldn't say fascinating because I don't want to sound voyeuristic, but it was like important for me as a maybe someone who doesn't have that experience of a Euro American to really get a little glimpse into like what is going on in the body when we talk about this stuff for a white passing person, um, and the guilt and the shame that does arise, and how do we metabolize that in a constructive manner? How do we rise above that? How do we get better than that? And I've even had that experience myself as a Diné woman when I was a kid. uh, the Pueblo neighbors, the Taos Pueblo people, they were like, and then those darn Diné people, they came and they stole our food and they stole our women. And I was like, no, we didn't do that. And I had this total denial, or this like probably like really toxic, like refusal to even entertain the idea that my people maybe did that. Um, that was when I was like, what, like 9 years old. And it wasn't until I was literally 24 or something that this light bulb went off that was like, actually, I say that I honor Indigenous oral history, but when those Taos Pueblo ladies said that, I didn't believe them. And that's not right. And I need to acknowledge the fact that my people stole their food and stole their women. And that is not okay. And from here on out, I need to be forthcoming. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if my screen went off, but from here on out, I need to be forthcoming about that. And so now, whenever I perform my music at a venue where there's Pueblo people, I always say I'm sorry. And I don't know if that's like the best thing to do, but I'm trying basically to say like, look, I acknowledge that my people did do this, and it and I am hereby declaring that I am going to dedicate any energy I have to helping your children, your elders, to make up for what my ancestors did. Because even though I wasn't the one who did it and I wasn't there, I still feel a responsibility to make things right. And invariably, like every time I do this, like some wonderful elders just crying, 'cause she's like, wow, thank you for finally owning up to that. Because, your
It's a
tribe was
lot.
really, yeah. So I think to me, reparations can be fun, but to be the one doing reparation can be incredibly, I shouldn't say fun because it's a serious topic, but it's an exciting opportunity to alter the legacy, to turn it into something beautiful. Um, but I have to acknowledge I had to go over that hump first, right? There was that denial that was like, no way, my people didn't do that, you know? And then to over the hump, which is like, you know what? They did that. And that's but there's freedom in that, there was a freedom in that for me
Yes.
to then become a true a true force of healing.
Right. And I think that intersectionality all is through people as well as past harms and family systems, abuse, like being able to acknowledge is huge through any
Yeah.
kind of racial healing that I needed for myself, and to realize that I too was holding. I was with my daughter in New York, and a very situation that is similar, is that I asked her, like, what are all these people doing out? And we was at night, it was in Brooklyn, and she said, it's summer. But what I was saying was, what are all these Black people doing out?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't naming it. And then I said to myself, like, wait a minute, why are you suspicious of Black
Yeah.
people? I said, that is inside of you. And I had to own that, name it, and say,
Yeah.
I am a product of what I have been taught about myself,
Yeah.
about me, and
Yeah.
call that out and say, I'm interrupting that. And we're
Yeah.
asking the community to do the same thing. This is a community well-being. You got to call it out,
Yeah.
accept, and walk forward.
Yeah. And that's not always popular, even if you do it. You
No,
won't
it's
always
not
be
popular.
you won't always be celebrated or get the applause. But I've come to a point where I want to do it anyway. It's because um, when you admit your own faults, you do expose yourself to punitive words or actions, and but they don't see that there's medicine in being responsible for uh, your actions, or in your case, your own internalized oppression that you then reflected outward, and to love yourself through that, um, and to model what it looks like to be someone who makes mistakes but can still evolve. Because that's what we need, right? Like, if we're
Yes.
not able to do that, then we're screwed.
Yeah, we're in
we need
trouble.
we
We're in trouble if we can't do that.
Yeah, but the truth is we can do that. We can be children of war but become people of peace. That's that's the promise that many different civilizations have proven in the past. My own people, in particular, being um, not just warlike, but having caste systems in the early 1100s,
Mm-hmm.
before Columbus was ever born. In Chaco Canyon, we had all kinds of weird stuff going on, caste systems, even in sort of like slavery or like forced labor. The Chaco Canyon archaeological site is hailed as this beautiful, extraordinary indigenous civilization of five-story buildings, and yes, it was amazing. But who built those buildings?
Right.
Not the high priests. Um, so then, what happened was Creator gave us a drought, they say, and this drought actually disbanded our entire civilization. And the archaeologists are always like, why did Chaco collapse? But they never ask the native people. And it's like, we collapsed because we were doing the wrong thing, and Creator
Mm.
gave us the smackdown, which we really needed.
Mm-hmm.
And from those ashes, we became a people who believe in k'eh, or kinship, interdependence. K'eh means compassion. K'eh means selflessness. K'eh means being there for each other, being a safety net for each other. And now, if you look at our clan system as Diné people, not one is higher than the other. We just don't do that anymore. So I think we've proven, and other civilizations around the world have proven, that you can grow up, you you can mature, you can evolve. Like, I think the reason American and European culture is so what's the word, worried that we can't evolve, is because we just haven't seen it in our recent memory. But I think that when it all comes crumbling down and we have nowhere left to colonize, except Mars or whatever,
Right.
then we're gonna have to face the music, and that's actually gonna be our gift. That's gonna be our time when we have to reckon. We have no choice but to reckon, or perish. And at that point, we get to reap all the benefits of evolution, all the benefits of, like, okay, that didn't work. What's a new thing we're going to do now? And I think
Hmm.
we're actually in that process right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we are definitely in that process, and I think there are many light workers like yourself who are out there finding each other. Is I think that more and more we will build communities, because one of my goals is like I believe there should be communities in every city where you can go and you can be heard and you can be cared for, and there's other people there that are willing to help you raise your vibration of being who you are to be in this world, and in communication with the earth, with with all that is. And so
Hmm.
what I hear you describing is that place where we are the people, we are the ones to create it, we are the ones we're looking for. It is our time now to do that. And so I love what you said. You said we need to heal our history as a nation, and you said the mother earth and people will be one system. And you're in
Hmm.
the end of
Yeah.
your TED talk, and I believe that that time is now, and when light workers find each other, that we are going to start merging and finding each other, and we're going to create these places of healing and wholeness in our world.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are cynical and hopeless that there's no hope for humanity. But I'm actually the opposite because I feel like there's only hope because the only thing that really works on this planet, the only thing that is sustainable, um, is love. Every
Yes.
time love goes away, the system crumbles. Um, so, like, hatred is actually, uh, is, or even the unsustainable society, like, it won't be sustained. It doesn't last. So, like, the thing that does last is community, interdependence, and having studied, you know, dozens of indigenous food systems that lasted for 6,000, 8,000, 11,000 years straight, we can tell through the archaeological record. Um, there are things that can be sustained in this world, and those communities were founded on a certain ethic, which involved reverence, respect, responsibility, reciprocity, um, so I think that it's not, I don't have like a false hope. It's actually very scientific hope, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the falcon, the baby falcon. The mother goes back and forth, as does the father, to feed this baby falcon, right? Back and forth, back and forth. Have you ever seen a falcon nest? They just fly all day for weeks to feed this baby falcon. Now, that's love. Like, this mother and father falcon have no personal gain out of nursing this little baby, right? It's just a squawking, ugly, annoying baby, but they keep coming back, right? Um, Imagine the falcon who decided to be selfish, who decided, you know what? I don't want to feed this baby. I want to go party. That baby's going to die, and those genes are not going to be passed on. The falcon who comes back, their children will live and those genes are passed on. So even from a genetic standpoint, love is the only thing that works, and that selflessness. So when I saw those falcons, I was like, okay, not only do I have hope, I have utter confidence that only love will remain, which is what a lot of wise traditions have said.
That's great. That's fantastic. My light just went off, I guess, because I'm not moving enough. But I'm gonna continue on. Oh my gosh. Uh,
Maybe move
well,
your arms around.
I gotta move my arms around. Oh, there we go. Thank you for that piece of of without fluorescent lights. Um, as you were saying, you were talking about, like, I believe in Dr. King's work, and we're grounded in community and love, and that is the direction that we are going, whether the world realizes it or not. And when you talked about one of the things I want to go back to what you said about the land, because I don't want that to be lost in this podcast. You said there were four things that happen in indigenous lands. And one was aligning with the forces of nature, intentionally habitat expansion, decentering humans, and design for perpetuity. Did I get
Yeah.
those right?
Yeah.
And so you talked a little bit about intentional habit expansion. Um, can you say a few minutes about the aligning with the forces of nature so that people can understand what happened with the food systems?
Yeah, absolutely. And also that TEDx talk, I only had 13 minutes. So there's actually
Yes.
many more than four
Oh, there's more
things
than
that
four.
I had to
Okay.
pick. I had to pick some of the lessons from my dissertation because you couldn't fit it all into the TED talk. So, but
How many are
you
there?
know, I mean, there's probably more than I truly understand, but if what I kind of saw and learned and identified was more like 12 or 15 little
Okay,
tricks
12
that
or
indigenous
15.
yeah, would do to
Okay.
keep their food system sustainable and biodiverse. So dovetailing with the forces of nature, you know, I'll give you an example, which will be a little bit vague, but then I'll give you a more concrete example. So one time I was at the Menominee Reservation in Wisconsin of the Menominee Nation, who are extraordinary people, and they had a elder there named Gary Bisa. And I was getting on the flight the next morning, and I told him I'm getting on the flight. He said, "Yes, I know. I put some tobacco down in prayer for you." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "I was asking the spirits to forgive you for going up into the sky." I said, "Okay, why?" He said, "Because if you were meant to be up there, the Creator would have given you wings. You're not meant to be up there." And I couldn't help but completely agree with him. But that's the difference between American culture and indigenous culture. American culture is like, screw that. I'm going to fly to the moon. I'm the boss. I don't give a beep what the creator gave me. I'm going to do what the beep I want, you know? But with indigenous peoples, we're humble. We are completely satisfied with what the creator has given us, whether it's the sun, you know, being our light. You know, back in the day, we didn't have light bulbs. Um, you know, arguably not because we couldn't have eventually designed them, but because we just didn't feel a need to take more than what the universe gave us. Maybe we're supposed to go dark when the sun goes down. Maybe that's part of our biological circadian rhythm. And now they're finding, right? Now your iPhone teaches you how to go to bed at the right time because they're finding that you need to have regular rest in order to be a healthy person. Um, but now we don't have time. Or you go to the grocery store, you could buy blueberries in the dead of winter. You could buy avocados in January. We don't care. We don't need to follow any seasons. We don't need to follow what Mother Earth is doing. We do whatever the heck we want, when we want, where we want. So in indigenous food systems, what I noticed is they would observe what the nature is doing and they would follow suit. So for example, um, you know, different nations noticed that if there's calm waters along the shore, the clams proliferate in that area. So what they would do is they would construct an intertidal rock wall, which would catch water and sediment, and when the tide goes down, and they would expand clam habitat by recreating what nature had already created. So there's one island, Quadra Island, where about 30% of the entire massive island, it's the big island, is has these intertidal rock walls. So they actually expanded clam habitat by 30% just by mimicking what Mother Earth was already doing. Um, so that's just one example. I could give you many more, but I think that that's the type of humility that we are being asked to have as a species. Um, but instead, we have the Elon Musk syndrome where it's like, let's see how far we can
Well, we
push
can
this
go. Right.
frontier. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Because it really does kind of sum up where we're at the end of our podcast, but it kind of sums up what we need. Like if you're listening to the podcast, what do we need to take away? Well, how do we humble ourselves and work with what we have? instead of trying to get more, better in whose eyes? How do we, and then lean into community together to be to illuminate and make these connections that have always been there for us. But we want to lean into what always has been. I cannot thank you enough for agreeing to be on my podcast. And I still like geeked out by it. Thank you for your scholarship, your work, everything that you're doing out in the world. Can you tell people one more time about where they can find you, your website?
Yes, lylajune.com, LYLAJUNE.com.
Awesome. I want to thank you. Thank you for listening to Love and Light. I'm going to say what I say at the end of every show. Treat yourself. Remember to treat yourself like your best friend. If you want to contact me, go to my website, lisaycollins.com. I've had a wonderful time, and I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you here next time. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, Everyday Living in Peace. You spent the last hour engaging in challenging and transformational conversations, all for the purpose of living a peaceful, joy-filled existence. Join me next time to continue growing in love and light through healing practices and acts of love. To learn more or work with me, Dr. Lisa, visit educationthroughengagement.com. That's educationthroughengagement.com. Remember, the world changes when we change by coming home to love. Tune in every second and fourth Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, here on transformationtalkradio.com.